first thing I want you to do is just listen to this music and think about how it makes you feel. Try to come up with words that this music makes you feel like. Who's got a word?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Like I just want to bounce.
Bounce.
Groovy.
Groovy.
Energetic.
Energetic.
Crazy.
Okay, crazy.
Happy and like cheerful.
Happy, cheerful.
Jazzy.
Jazzy. Fun.
It's like kind of like has a beat.
Okay, yeah, it does have a beat. You definitely feel that.
Like I want to like dance to it.
I noticed your fingers started going right away too.
Positive.
Positive.
It made me joy and made me start pretending I was playing.
Did you? So your fingers were wiggling too.
Like we just gone to war.
Oh, okay, so time to celebrate, huh? Something super fun. Well, have we talked about Duke Ellington? Do you remember talking about Duke Ellington? Right, because he wrote the A Train song, right? Okay, I would like you to see these pictures. I think I might have showed them to you from the storybook. Did I show you the storybook?
Yes.
Okay, but this time you get to see the pictures a little bit bigger. So this is the Duke Ellington story. So Duke was born in 1899 in Washington, D.C. And what he really wanted to do was play baseball. But his mom and dad were insisting that he take piano lessons. He didn't like those piano lessons so much because he had to play the notes that were on the page, and the notes that were on the page were exactly what his teacher said he had to do, and he couldn't just make things up. He had to learn exactly what was there. He did it, but he didn't like it very much. He did it until his parents said it was his choice, and then he kissed that piano lessons goodbye. And he went on doing other things, playing baseball, thinking maybe someday he'd have a career as a baseball player. But one day, he was with his friends. Maybe they were playing pool, and he heard that same music that you just heard. And you know how it made your fingers wiggle? It made his fingers start to wiggle too. And he could hardly stand it. He put down the baseball bat, and he went right to the piano, and he could not stop playing. That was all he wanted to do, was play the piano. Because all of a sudden, he had freedom to kind of make some things up and have his own creativity in it, and that really appealed to him. The women and the men all would just swoon around him and lean into the piano because they just thought he was so charming when he was playing music. So he would put on his nicest clothes when he would go to play, and everybody wanted to be his friend. Pretty soon he formed a band, and they were called the Washingtonians. Because do you remember where he was born? Washington, D.C. So this band was one of the bands of Washington, D.C. They played all over the place at clubs, and they were getting lots of fans. People really liked listening to their music. But then the band decided, maybe it's time for us to grow and kind of spread our wings out a little bit. So they moved to New York City. Do you think that would be a bigger city? Yeah, so they moved to New York City, wondering if they were going to be able to make it big there. Well, they did. They got a gig, as they say in jazz, which means they got a booking to play their music at a place called the Cotton Club. Back then, that was the best place to play. So they were pretty excited, and they know they had to do So they worked and worked, and the gig went super well. So well, in fact, that the owners of the Cotton Club said, we want you to play here every single week. So they got to play regularly at the Cotton Club. And then they brought in the radio station people who would air their programs live over the radio. Because then they didn't have TV or video cameras or anything. So the only way people could hear live music, if they weren't at the event, was to play it over the radio. So people sat around their little radios listening to their music and snapping their fingers and dancing in their living rooms and having a really great time. And Duke Ellington started selling all kinds of albums, all kinds of records, they called them then, because everybody just really enjoyed his music. Pretty soon Duke met another guy. His name was Billy Strayhorn, and he helped him write the Take the A-Train song, and that became the #1 hit song of 1941. What does it mean if it's the #1 hit song? What do you think?
It means that it was the most liked that year.
That's right. More people bought that record than any other song in the country.
So like a break?
A break, that was they were really kind of big break, weren't they? Because that made them the #1 band.
So was the things they put on the radio, did they have to make a bunch of those for this?
I don't know. Probably. Okay, so then the most prestigious place to play in New York City was a place called Carnegie Hall. Raise your hand if you've heard of Carnegie Hall. Yeah, it's really awesome. I think I showed you some pictures, didn't I? And they got to play in Carnegie Hall, but the name of the song that they played there is one called Black, Brown, and Beige. It wasn't a ragtime music and it wasn't jazzy. It was more of a traditional classical piece, but it was really cool because it gave Duke Ellington a chance to really perform some music that was about the people that he represented, the African Americans, and it was all about their civil rights movement, about slavery. It was a beautiful tribute to his people and where they come from. Well, finally, Duke Ellington died, and he died from lung cancer in 1974. Now, typically, lung cancer comes from people who have been around smoke a lot. Back then, everybody was smoking. And you didn't necessarily have to be the one smoking in order to get lung cancer. If you were just around the smoke and breathing it in, oftentimes that could make you very sick too. So he ended up dying from that.
Isn't it better to leave the smoking than smoking?
Well, smoking is definitely worse, but none of it is good.
Do you know how old he was when he died?
Yes, he was 75 years old.
So